5, 6, 7, 8.
Hi everyone, welcome to the EX Podcast episode number 6. My name is Stefan Vincent. I've started this podcast because I believe that companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talents. Let me ask you a simple question. Are you excited to get up every day and go to work? Well, consider this. Only 30% of the workforce feel engaged at work. That means for the other 70%, well, work kind of sucks. And yes, we all get it. Engaged employees are good for business. But why companies are not acting on it? After all, employees are the first ambassadors of a brand. Engaged employees foster innovation, deliver higher customer service, and bring creativity to the organization. In short, they are more productive. This podcast brings a different lens to the employee experience, a brand and customer experience angle rather than a traditional HR angle. In our episodes, we cover multiple topics that touch and impact the employee experience, like the key components of a positive employee experience, or office space design and its impact on the company's culture, the employee journey map, or how design thinking, collaboration, and innovation are intertwined. We also talk about employer branding and employee engagement tools and measurements, or the place of technology in the employee experience. Today's guest is Mike Kelly, co-founder and partner at Developer Town. Developer Town focuses on designing and developing cloud-based SaaS and mobile solutions, but is also known for its very unique workspace and culture, both highlighted in publications such as Forbes magazine. Today with Mike, we'll talk about how intentional office space design brings the company culture to life, why creating and maintaining a culture is about testing, and iterating, being agile, very much like, well, software development. How designing employee experience is like designing customer experience. You've got to focus on the people and understand their needs. And finally, we'll learn about Developer Town's own and meaningful definition of culture. This episode is brought to you by Mold, M-O-L-D. Mold is a full-service brand agency that works with artists, writers, and creatives to help its clients increase sales, book more gigs, and boost audience engagements. Its creative team of graphic designers, videographers, writers, and brand managers work together to make sure that every time a client's name is seen or heard, it shines. Find out more at themoldagency.com. I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you get a chance, please make sure to review this podcast on iTunes. You can open up the iTunes app and type in Stefan Vincent or EX Podcast, and you will find us there. And last thing, if you want to send me feedback, suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. I'm very excited for today's guest, Mike Kelly. Mike is a co-founder and partner of Developer Town. Mike, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Tell me about your role and what does Developer Town do?
Right, so I'm one of the partners here at Developer Town. My role is probably the closest thing we have to a CEO, even though we would never call it that because we're so small. And what we do is we're a consulting company. We work with startups and large established companies to help them launch new products in the market. And for us, when we think of launching new digital products, typically SaaS products or mobile products, we think that that's a combination of software development, great software design and user experience, and marketing. And our pitch is design, build, and launch with traction, all in one place. So we put together a blended team that does everything you need to get a new product to market.
How many people do you have?
In the core Developer Town business, we have just under 50 people. And that's a pretty blended mix. The majority of those are software developers. And then I think the next highest concentration is designers, and then marketing people, and then overhead like me.
So you say in the core of Developer Town business, what does it mean?
Yeah, so we're a complicated business in that when we are, well, maybe can I tell the story a little bit and then it'll come out of that. So we launched in 2010. We had this great idea to help startups specifically. We were only going to work with startups in the beginning to launch new products in the market. And it was really a response to something that all the founders had seen, where if you've ever worked in a startup or known anybody who's worked in a startup, then you know that every startup takes shortcuts. They build technical debt. They try to get a product to market as quickly as possible. And sometimes that technical debt becomes so much that the product just falls under its own weight, and they can't move forward, right? They just kind of get stuck. And we had seen that a number of times as individuals before we started Developer Town, all in kind of different roles and capacities. And we thought, what if we started a consulting company that really attacked that? We would build software in a different way, using a different process, different stack of tools, different focus, where if a founder came and worked with us, they wouldn't, our kind of implicit promise would be, you're not going to fall prey to the trap of technical debt, right? Doesn't mean we'd never take shortcuts. It just means we're going to make more calculated ones and really be conscious about, those trade-offs up front. So that's what we did. We hired a bunch of developers, and we went into the market and did that. And it turns out the market told us that if you really want to build great products, you don't just need a bunch of developers. And so in 2012, we hired a bunch of designers. We built a full design practice. Randy Fisher came on board to help us do that. And really, at 2012, the pitch was, it's not just great developers who are not going to build a crappy code base with a bunch of technical debt, but it's now a bunch of awesome user experience professionals and interface designers along with those great developers who are going to build a great product. And then, again, around 2014, we got feedback from the market that even if you build a killer product, and there were a couple of examples in 2013, 2014, that really hurt, where we had built some awesome product and nobody saw it. One of the challenges of working with startups, especially if you're the technology partner, is you're really trusting the founding team, whoever that is, whether it's an individual founder or a number of co-founders, to do everything else: legal, accounting, marketing, sales, if it's B2B, like everything else that needs to get done in a business, which turns out to be a lot. We're basically saying, look, we're the technology guys, you're going to do everything else. And that's a mistake. And it's a mistake for a couple of reasons. One is we learned that you can build a great product, and if nobody's doing marketing, this company's not going anywhere. Nobody's going to see it, right? That is a tree falling in the woods. So that was mistake number one, that we kind of, in a couple of cases, had trusted that some marketing work was going to get done, and it didn't. And then mistake number two, which we kind of learned after the fact when we built a marketing practice, was you really can't divorce a lot of the early marketing work that needs to happen, everything from customer development and understanding the competition and understanding all the things that classic product owners do within a product team. You really can't divorce that from the process of building and designing the software. It really is one and the same. We didn't realize that when we first went down the path of saying we needed marketing, but we have since come to just recognize the truth that is, you need marketing people involved up front before you've written a line of code. They really do influence, if they're good, they really do influence the direction of the software and how you speak to your customers. So in 2014, we added a marketing team. So rewind a little bit. Somewhere between 2012 and 2014, we did a small pivot. I don't know if you know this, but startups turn out to be a little bit of an accounts receivable risk. They don't always pay their bills.
No kidding.
Yeah, as a consulting company, that turns out to be a problem. I mean, this is all obvious in hindsight, but at the time, we were changing the world. So around 2013, we did a pivot, and we basically said, look, what we really specialize in is launching new products. We can do that for anybody. We love doing it for startups. We still do it for startups, but we really love doing it for large companies that have, in many cases, bigger, scarier, more aggressive goals, which is kind of awesome. If you look at some of the most exciting projects we're working on today, we do some cool things for startups, but really it's our enterprise clients who are looking at the world and saying, you know what, this is missing, and we're big enough to actually take it on.
But they may lack the startup mentality of getting things done very quickly and out the door.
Yep. Yeah. So even with our large clients, we follow the lean startup methodology, and we totally drink the Kool-Aid. And so we do lean startup, agile development, all the latest buzzwords. But we believe it, and we do it with our large clients as well. So on our largest projects, we try to ship code at the end of every single sprint. We try to work with our clients to talk to their customers through the development process. We do everything we do with startups, just at a different scale. And all right, so I tell you all that. This was originally around why my vagueness on talking about the core developer town company. Well, one of the things we noticed is around 2015, 2016, as we've started to work with more enterprise clients, is we've started to drift away from our startup roots, right? Like, there are very explicit reasons why we started this company that are very emotional for us as a founding team and really drive a little bit of our culture. When you join Developer Town, you're joining what you think and believe is an entrepreneurial focused team, and you want to be a part of these early initiatives. And I'm not saying it's not a lot of the same activities in our corporate clients, but it certainly doesn't feel the same, right? And so to stay true to our startup roots, we've done a couple of things that help make us more authentic as both a brand in the marketplace, where we go to large companies and say, we can help you move like a startup, but also more authentic to our employees, where we say, look, come to Developer Town, you're going to be working with early stage entrepreneurs, you're going to be doing things that typical developers or designers might only get to do a couple times in their life. If you work here, you're going to get to do this 5, 10, 15 times in your career. And the way that we do that is last year we launched an incubator, Developer Town Starts. So Developer Town is the place that you come where you pay us cash. Reference that early accounts receivable problem. We like cash at Developer Town. And then Developer Town Starts is the place that you come to do work for equity. So the Developer Town Starts team, we have a fund behind it, which is a little bit of our money, a little bit of external money, and that team focuses full-time on companies where it's work for equity instead of work for cash. There are 5 companies in that program right now at the time of this recording, I think. They're currently looking for their next round of companies, which is why I'm a little vague on that, but there's 5 companies in the program. So far, all happy customers, which is great. And it's really, that's been like a highlight of going back to our entrepreneurial roots. Like, these are, 1 or 2 person founding teams working, around the clock with our team to build and launch new products. And it's awesome to watch. The Starts team, without question, they are the hardest working people in this building. It's amazing to see what they can do. Then we also, to go back to our entrepreneurial roots, recognized a couple of years ago that we should eat our own dog food and we should do some of our own projects and products. So we have a handful of companies out in the market. There's a product called Tenant Tracker, tenanttracker.net, which is commercial real estate software, which is a product that is ours. We help launch. There's a product that's going to be launched later this year called Waterly, which helps with it's a SaaS product for small municipalities to better manage EPA reporting for water treatment facilities. There's a product called Piano in a Flash, which is online music education, which is launched with one of the most amazing Emmy award-winning piano instructors in the country, Scott Houston. So there's a number of products in there where we either did a joint venture or we did our own venture, where we basically said, look, we tell our clients to do this all the time. What if we just did it ourselves and created those opportunities for our team and our employees to transition into those companies over time? So today, if you look at what we affectionately call the Developer Town family of companies, it's not just the core consulting business. There's also the accelerator and then a handful of other businesses that kind of surround it all, which help us kind of stay true to not just our message in the marketplace about, we know startups inside and out, but also help us deliver on our brand promise to our employees. Okay.
It's very interesting, and it might be a long introduction to where we want to go, but at the same time, it illustrates one of the things that I love about Developer Town is, first of all, that sort of holistic vision of where you want to be as a business, right? And also that adaptability and learning. You experience a few things, you see whether or not it's working, you respond to the market demand, right?
Yes.
And then you adapt and you try and you do something else. Which I think is a good representation of what the culture of Developer Town is all about. Now, another way I think to better describe or illustrate what the culture is about is the office space and how it was designed and what was the purpose behind it. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yes. So if you do a Google search for Developer Town and you look at images, you will find some photos of our office space. And what is hard to describe is we have a big, giant 50,000 square foot warehouse. I think our main space is about 30,000 square feet. And in that 30,000 square feet, we've built a bunch of tiny houses. Most of them are 8 by 10. A couple of them are 8 by 12. They all have front doors. They have windows. They have roofs. Some of them have skylights. A couple of them have chimneys. They're all tiny houses with different finishes. Some have barnwood, some have siding, some have, we have an Airstream series, which has, they're metal clad and they have rounded corners, no 90-degree angles. And the idea is, if we have a bunch of these tiny little houses, thus the name Developer Town, and we put them all on wheels so we can dynamically rearrange the space, it would allow us as a consulting company to more dynamically respond to our client base when in working with small project teams to launch new products. So part of this stems from, so this is Michael Clorn, who's my partner. This is kind of his biggest I told you so moment in our relationship, which still ticks me off to this day. Because, the tiny house thing is a little too cute, right, when you come in and look at it. And I was a skeptic when we first started, but Mike was adamant that we needed these tiny houses that would be part of our brand and be part of our image, and it would help with the way that we work. And the basic pitch, there's a couple of different pitches, but the basic pitch is if you have a bunch of tiny houses on wheels, one of the things that prevents employees from, if anybody who's listening to this has ever worked in a cubicle, then there's a couple of things that prevent employees from bringing personal items into the office space, which you want, right? Because you want them to feel like it's their space, they own it, it's a place that makes them more productive and feel comfortable. Right. One challenge is it's not a private space, even though it is a personal space, and so they're not gonna, a lot of people don't want to put up photos of their kids and stuff like that because it's right out there in the open, right? So it's a little weird. We didn't want that. Also, if you've ever worked in a startup, you know that you change teams all the freaking time and your job changes. And so suddenly you're not working in this cube anymore. You're working on the other side of the building with another team because we've pivoted and things have changed. And so now you have to pick up all your personal items and move them to the other side of the building. And it creates a disincentive to bring in things like books and big monitors and stuff like that because it's just more stuff you have to move. And the other problem, there's a big trend to open workspaces right now, and we believe that creative work takes white space. You need privacy. If you're designing, if you're coding, if you're doing anything that takes deep thought, you need the ability to close a door, turn on a light. All of our houses have little front porch lights, and if your light is on, it's kind of like on air, do not disturb, right? It means I'm on a phone call, I'm thinking, I'm in a meeting, I'm doing something that you aren't allowed to knock. And it works. By convention, most people respect the porch light. So the idea was, can we give people privacy and give them space, and then also make it a dynamic space that as project teams form and wrap up, all you have to do to join your next project team is unplug your house, push it over to the next cul-de-sac, plug it back in, and you're ready to rock. So hopefully it only takes you a few minutes to relocate project teams instead of half a day. It also allowed us to be intentional about the way we design the physical space, where early on we would do these cul-de-sacs by project team where the entire group was co-located in one spot. But then that cul-de-sac created this little cul-de-sac of whiteboards because almost all the houses have a whiteboard on the outside of them. So you have a default meeting space where there's always a spot you can go out and just start talking through some stuff with the team you're collaborating with. Then, because it's a big giant warehouse, we also have some open spaces where big long tables where people can just plop down and start collaborating and do pairing and things like that. So that was kind of the original vision. I, of course, never thought it would work, and within 6 months, our space, we had a photo in Forbes magazine and stuff like that. So that was Mike's huge I told you so moment, right? Like, it's sticky. People remember it. When people walk into our space, they're blown away. Like, they immediately think like, holy cow, this is like super creative and innovative. Like, I want to work with these guys. They remember the tiny houses. And that's a good reflection on us as a consulting company, because we want you to feel that way when you walk in the space. We want you to feel a little bit wow and overwhelmed and like, how did you guys think of this? Now, there's a second pitch, which is the one that we don't talk about as much, which is also like crazy financially sound to do this. If you think of a typical office space for a consulting company, they're probably buying, if they're a startup, they're buying Class B space, renting Class B space. If you're an established consulting company, you're probably renting Class A space, right? Which is, in our market, is probably somewhere between $15 and $30 a square foot, depending on where you want to be, whether you want to be downtown, in a suburb, whatever that looks like. Buying a big giant warehouse in kind of a beat up part of town where you're part of the turnaround team that's going to make an investment turns out to be something more like $2 to $4 a square foot because it's a big giant warehouse. And when you think of traditional office space and you think of cubes and stuff like that, a brand new cubicle will cost somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000 depending on how much you want to spend. In one of our tiny houses, to build from the ground up with a custom home builder, we actually have a home builder who builds them, costs about $6,000 a house. So it's almost the same price as a cubicle if you were going to buy them new. We pay a dramatically lower price on a square footage basis, and people get a space that is uniquely theirs. They get to pick their carpeting, their or hardwood flooring. They get to pick their colors, what kind of lighting they want in the space. Everything is up to them. So it's been a huge win financially, and it's a huge win for employee morale.
What kind of impact has it had on the culture and the performance as a team as well?
So that answer is an interesting one. So I'll tell you the good and the bad. So early on, it was awesome. We were in a much smaller space. When we first built the houses, we weren't here in this big giant warehouse. We were in a much smaller space on the north side of Indy for about a year, and then we ended up buying this building. And when we were in that much smaller space, it was awesome. Everybody came out and collaborated with one another. People were shouting through windows and shooting Nerf darts through windows at one another, like, because the houses were all kind of crammed together. And while it was an awful, crappy space, like, this is like Startup 101, right? Like, I mean, there were, might
it was not even a C space, it was more of a D or E space.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like, Roach Motels, right? Like, it was awful. But it was community, right? Like, it was, we built the first batch of houses all by ourselves, which is a whole nother learning thing. Do not let software developers build a bunch of little tiny houses. It doesn't turn out well. But we had a great sense of community in that smaller space because we were all kind of crammed in there together, right? When we bought this warehouse, a very scary thing happened. We had this theory that we would provide this private space for people where they could focus, and then we would have these common areas where people could come out and collaborate when they need to. And what ended up happening is somewhere between 15 employees and, I'm making up numbers, but let's call it 15 and 30-ish employees, or maybe 35 employees. A couple of years ago, if you'd walked into this building here at Developer Town, it would have been a graveyard. Like, it was almost like a library. Everybody was in their house. Everybody was heads down working, which is awesome as a consulting company, but it's also a little bit scary because you're losing all that collaboration opportunity, right? Part of the theory of building a collaborative space is that you have more senior people mentoring junior people, and you have relationships forming that will create these sticky bonds that when you get a job offer from an awesome employer here in town, you're not just looking at the financials, but you're like, hey, I still want to work with Jason, and I still want to work with Lisa, and so I don't want to leave my friends. But if you're in a tiny house all day for 8 hours a day and you never see Lisa or Jason, guess what? It's pretty easy to just look at the financials. So it was bad. It was so bad for a while. We actually talked about doing, like, maybe we had made a mistake and maybe we shouldn't do tiny houses. And then a magical thing happened. We grew through it. So as our company has grown, somewhere around 40-ish people, 35 to 40 people, it just, without any action on our part, it flipped the other way. Our teams got big enough, the company got big enough that people just started naturally coming out of their house to start collaborating and meeting with people. And right now, if you walk in here any day, you'll find people outside working together, helping one another. And it is right now, I would say, it looks like a really good balance. And we're super excited we didn't scrap everything and decide to start over. It's working now. So I feel like if you're going to experiment with something like this in your office, there's some tipping point of you have to have enough heft that people naturally need to bounce off of one another. On smaller project teams with a smaller headcount, it can feel really insular.
So Developer Town has an amazing employment brand, right? Now, I'm sure that you have a lot of people wanting to come work for you. How selective are you, and are you looking for a specific profile?
Yeah, so the answer is it depends. I would say people wanting to work here comes in spurts. There are a lot of great employer brands here in our market, which is actually good. That helps us in the long run, especially we've hired a number of people from out of state, and it is better to say that there are these other companies if you're going to relocate, that you're not just relocating for us, right? You're joining a market where there are other tier 1 employers, which is super helpful. Good point, yeah. Yep. So we like having them, even though they're competition for talent. We love having them here. They've made it easier for us to import talent. But yes, we get a lot of people who want to come here, both experienced and straight out of college. And I think there's a balance based on the type of work that we do. So one is we've always got to be careful. We're not the type, because we're a consulting company, we're not the type of organization that can pull in 10 new college recruits every year, just because we have to, for our clients, right, we have to maintain the right level of expertise. So we do invest in people out of college, but it's right now, it's we're going to hire 1 a year or 2 a year. It's low single digit numbers. We tend to look more for experienced people because that's what the types of projects we're taking on tend to demand. That may change as we do more of our own products and do more, where we're building our own teams for products that we're taking to market. But I think for the core consulting business, that's probably always going to be the case. So the ideal profile is somebody with 2 to 6 years of experience. If you get above that, it's not that we wouldn't love looking at you, we would, but we're a consulting company, and that comes with its own set of financial constraints on what you can do and what you can't do. Product companies typically can make better financial offers. We have way more interesting work, and we have a lot of variety, and we have profit sharing, we have all sorts of crazy incentives, but we find that sweet spot is probably 2 to 6 years of experience to have you come in. And then in terms of the way that we think about that, it's a slightly different across each of the disciplines. So the big 4 for us are development, design, marketing, and then we have a group we call our engagement management group. They're kind of the Swiss Army knives that fill in the cracks between all of those other disciplines. Superstar generalists that do everything from project management to business analysis to testing to a little bit of product coaching with our founders, and all the other things that it takes to run a healthy software development project. They're kind of the people who make sure that stuff happens. So in each of those groups, we have a little bit of a different ideal profile for how junior can they be, how much mentoring can we provide them, and a lot of that's just made up of based on the current makeup of the team that's there now.
Do you have a specific structure around culture and employee experience?
So
you have a head of HR,
we have a head of people and culture, Dawn, and she's been fantastic. Now she's only been here for about a year, so she's still making her mark, but so we try to be intentional about it. I would say there's some things that we do. I will not tell you we do all of them awesomely, but we try. We're learning. We're growing, right? We're still growing and learning. And there's some things that I know that we do that are awesome, and there's some things that I know that we're trying to get better at. But I would say some things that we think about, we try to be pretty intentional about the onboarding experience. What are those first touches that you're going to get even before you show up, right? Before you walk in the door your first day, what are some of the touches that you've had with different people who are here? When you do show up, what does that experience feel like? How are you introduced to the broader team? How are you introduced to the individual team that you're going to be working with? the different partners here. How do you learn about the history of our company? Because we kind of think that's important.
It is.
And so we try to be pretty intentional about the onboarding experience. We're starting to get intentional about the offboarding experience. I'd say that's one of the big things Dawn's brought, is trying to learn from why people leave and why they move on and what can we be doing better, which is awesome. It's awesome to start to get some of that stuff. We're members of True You, which I don't know if you've talked to anybody there yet, but they're an organization here in town that works with smaller companies to help them provide some different employee benefits, particularly in ways that you can invest in your people. So that's everything from a leadership program that we can send people to, online courses, in-person classes that happen around town, volunteer opportunities that they help coordinate. There's a bunch of stuff that they provide that we try to get our employees access to, and that's not just for our employees but also for their families. So being a member of that community allows us to do some things that a company our size just can't do. You would typically only see those in some of the larger companies.
Very nice.
And then we also we try to be intentional about creating some experiences throughout the year. So like we're big on the holiday party around Christmas. We're historically very big on Halloween. Halloween is actually our most crazy time. So, again, picture a warehouse full of a bunch of tiny houses. Halloween, door-to-door trick-or-treating. Imagine you have a bunch of kids who can now go door-to-door within a super safe environment. So we go a little bit overboard around Halloween, and we leverage that. For the last 3 years, we've leveraged that to help raise some money for a charity here locally called Dream Alive. And then we have a handful of other experiences, right? So everything from we most recently did an outing to watch the newest Harry Potter movie. We've done Indians games, local baseball game. We've done outings at my house. I have a farm, and so last year we brought some people out there for the first time for a big family outing. We put up the big tent, did a barbecue and all that stuff. We've done all sorts of small things. Recently we just did an Easter party for kids where we did an egg hunt throughout the building and stuff like that. So we try to do a mix of kind of family-friendly events. We try to get the spouses in here and kids in here as much as we can. Again, it's a super unique space. It allows us to do some of that stuff, and then some things that are employees only, just to give them a chance to bond.
One thing that is very interesting to me about the startup and tech community here in Indianapolis is, and I'm not familiar with other tech or startup scenes in other cities, but even though, as you mentioned, it's very competitive, it's also very, I don't know if it's collaborative, but there's a sense of friendship and I know that many tech companies actually work together to attract talent from out of state, as you mentioned earlier. Yeah. And also there are bonds between founders of many tech companies here. What's your take on this? Yeah, so TechPoint here in Indianapolis does an amazing job of around talent specifically, right? They have their extern program, which is bringing in super young talent in Indianapolis to change their opinion of what kind of market this is and what's nightlife look like here and all those types of things. I mean, we're never going to be New York, clearly, but there's just a totally different perception of what we are versus what we really are, right? And the extern program has been hugely successful. They also have an expat program, which is, hey, you went to school at Purdue or Rose-Hulman, you've relocated to the coast for a couple of years, that's great. Now you want to have a family, guess where you want to be? Come back to Indiana, we'd love to have you. And they're, again, what I think is a pretty successful program. And they've done a bunch of other stuff. So TechPoint, crushing it, super helpful to all of us here in Indianapolis, and they do a lot to bring organizations together. A lot of us are friends who founded some of these companies, and we do spend a lot of time together, whether that's on boards for not-for-profits or just getting our companies together to do things like there's an annual ping pong tournament, which is a bunch of tech companies raising money for a not-for-profit. We do an annual disc golf outing with a company here in town called Anchor Point, where it's us versus them for a half day out on a course with disc golf and probably some beers. And that's just a couple of small examples, but there are a ton of events that we do where we all try to get together. And a little bit of it is
all of us are blessed to be in an industry where it is a rising tide, right? Like, I mean, software is eating the world right now, right? So there's a lot of work. All of us are desperate for talent, so that makes it, which means we all have a lot of work in front of us. So while we are competitors, it's hard to be super crazy competitive because there's a lot of work to do, right? And that's awfully nice. Someday I'm sure that will change and things will get a little more cutthroat, but there's a lot of work out there, which makes it easy for us to collaborate and try to find ways to support one another rather than undermining one another. And we have phenomenal partners here in town on the technology side that, at different times in a different place, we could be competitors, and we don't view each other that way. And then that helps from a talent perspective and we do this all the time where we have some of our best people who are like, hey, I'm kind of getting burnt out on consulting, or I'm looking for something different. I'm ready for something different. And it doesn't look like here at Developer Town we have that opportunity. Like, maybe I'm ready to try my hand at leading a team, and we just, we don't have that. We're a relatively flat organization, right? We don't have that opportunity in front of them. One of the awesome things we can do is we can say, hey, look, maybe you can't do that right here, right now. We don't offer that, but you should go talk to is one of these 3 companies. And I know that Engineering has sent some of their people our way over the years. We've sent some people their way. Like, there's a number of companies here in town where we can try to guide our best talent to the right fit for them. And for us, it's like, that just means we have another advocate in that company who's going to root for us, who's going to make sure we're successful in the projects where we collaborate with them. B, they're going to come back. Like, this is a small market too, right? I mean, while there's a lot of work here and a lot of businesses, Indianapolis is, still relatively small in the grand scheme of things. And, all of that stuff comes around again, right? Like, that person who you helped find their next opportunity halfway through their career, 10 years from now, they could be your customer, right? They could be running a business, or they could be, starting something new, and they're going to come back because they remembered how you treated them. And I think playing the long game like that only wins. And many, many people in this market think that way.
You've done a project for an airline that was related to an employee engagement app and scheduling.
Yes.
When you developed that app, did you apply some of the things that you've learned in terms of culture and employee engagement into that project, or was it completely different?
It's an interesting question. A lot of what we did...
Or vice versa, did you learn anything from what you actually bid for that company to apply internally?
So the way that project started is we sent a kind of an away team to immerse themselves in that culture. Everything from sitting in their call center to, interviewing pilots and flight attendants to, you name it. We spent hours kind of just trying to understand who they were and what their challenges were and what their strengths were. And then trying to pull that back to say, now there were some very specific business goals they needed to hit as well through that process, but we tried to balance, like, what are the timelines that you have to hit the business goals that you have? What are the cultural elements that you want to change or accentuate through this process? And for them, one of the biggest things that they wanted to do was to demonstrate a very tangible investment in culture and in the relationships that they have. It's an airline, right? So many of the airlines are unionized, and it's not always the best relationship. Historically, I'm not giving away any trade secrets here, right? Just go look at unions and airlines historically, and you'll understand kind of what the market is. And so they wanted to kind of fix some of that, right? They wanted to say, look, we do care about your experience. We do care about how you view our brand as an employer, and we want to make a very concrete investment in that relationship. In the airline industry, while they're like crazy about efficiency and turning over planes faster and doing all these things, they're like, it is not necessarily known for bleeding edge technology on the employer-employee experience, right? And so we were lucky enough to get an opportunity to kind of go into that space and do some interesting things. Amazing stories came out of that. Like, it was voluntary adoption for when we rolled it out. It was voluntary adoption for all of the flight attendants and pilots to be able to use the product. And I think we're up to some obscene number, like 90% adoption, voluntary adoption. It was never mandated, which is awesome. Speaks to like a great user experience and a great value prop from the employer perspective of, are we really scratching an itch that you guys feel like needs to be scratched? So that's been that's been like just a really great story. The feedback that we get, I fly that airline occasionally, and I've been in airports randomly. Like I was just recently in Boston or New York, I can remember where I was, but I went up to a pilot and just sat down next to him and said, hey, I see you're with this airline. Do you use this app? And he's like, yeah, I got it on my phone right here. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like my company helped build that. And can I ask you a bunch of questions? And he was like, this is weird, but sure. Like, fire away, right? Like, so was able to ask him a bunch of questions about the experience and what he thought of it. And his answer was I've been blown. I mean, he's been a pilot for multiple airlines, right? He's like, I've been blown away. Like at first I thought like this is some software that we purchased and licensed, and to learn that it's like our software is like mind blowing to me. Like this is like awesome, user experience. It's Apple grade quality. And like, so hearing that stuff has been amazing. And then the feedback that we get from the field around that, where we've tried to make it easy to give feedback through the app. We proactively through the client, we all reach out on a regular basis to both a formal customer advisory panel, as well as some others, some user advisory panels and others to actively pull feedback in on not just what's most important for the company, like, because again, there's hard ROIs here, right? Like they have business objectives they need to hit. They're trying to do some things behind the scenes.
Sure.
But they balance that with what do you want, right? So what might be most important for us is the ability to automate how you dispute your flight time hours. Like how you can do some HR thing. Because we know that if we can help fix that, it's going to reduce call center time or, whatever, right? Like we're going to save money in the long run.
Yeah.
But what might be more important to you is, I want the ability to just click a button and order a new uniform. Like, why do I have to go to this antiquated e-commerce site and fill in my size information every single time? You freaking know how big I am. I've worked here for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, why can't I just hit a button and get a new uniform? And so like those taking both those inputs and then collaboratively, because they're totally into it, they're a great employer, say, okay, how do we listen to what our employees want, and then obviously balance that against the hard business goals that we need to hit and build a great product. And like that beautifully illustrates, even in a corporate client, what we view as part of the secret sauce of the lean startup methodology and the way that we work, which is listen to customers. And most people don't think of their employees as customers, but it is no different, right? Like it doesn't matter if you're selling Instagram, right? Or if you're selling a B2B product, or if you're using an internal captive is in quotes, right? Captive audience that must use your software. Like they have a choice. They don't have to work for you. There's another insurance company that will hire them. There's another, whoever, right, that's out there that they can go work for. And today, a lot of people view the tools that they use in their job as an essential part of their experience with the company.
It's a very good point. It's the main message that I'm trying to deliver through the Summit EX podcast initiative is that whatever customers do on the customer side, whatever companies do on the customer side, they could and even should apply it to the employee side, from the empathy, the research, to the segmentation, right? When you, especially in large organizations, why would you treat the same people as the same bunch? Right? There are different stages of their careers. They may have different aspirations, different needs, different expectations. Why would you just have the same benefits package to everybody, or the same mass email communication to everybody, while if you're in accounting, you may not care about the same things as in sales or in development? All right, so that's an interesting, very interesting topic, and I guess good exercise as well for you to be able to develop a product mostly focused on employee versus typically it's customer products, right? Yeah,
it's it's an awesome fit because we get to leverage a lot of the things that we do when we think of customers, and it's great when there's that alignment. It's, some of the challenges we've had historically, where there is this tension, right? And we don't take these types of projects anymore. We learn too. But, if the employer doesn't view that customer base, their employees as a customer base, right? And they don't think user experience matters, and they don't think listening to feedback matters and getting their opinions, and like they'll know what they want when we tell them, right? Yeah. Like if that's their worldview, then we know we can't be successful, because again, again, we think it's developers, designers, and marketing. And marketing is really, it's brand, it's messaging, it's understanding the segments, just like you were talking about, right? Like it's all of those things. How do you effectively deliver the message that you're trying to deliver, and create excitement and create, show empathy and stuff like that. And when we look at where we're successful, it's where we can bring all three of those into play. And if a client comes to us and says, look, we just want your JavaScript developers, right? Like we don't need that. We don't need user experience. We don't need marketing. We know we're not gonna, I don't say we're not gonna be successful. We're gonna struggle. We're not gonna do our best work, right? Yeah. Because our best work means going and talking to the people who are going to use it and asking them, is this faster or is this faster? Do you like this or this? How would you do these other things in your life? And because we know that it's going to lead to better software.
So you've been involved in building and scaling many companies, right? What would be the 2, 3, 4 main tips that would give to our audience in terms of things that they have to know or to focus on when they either start their company or scale up their company when it comes to culture or employee experience?
So I think the first tip is somebody on the team needs to own it. So like early on, one of our founding partners, Nathan Altman, I think really flew the flag beautifully for us around company culture, and not just company culture, but our brand in the market. Like, Mike Cloran, my partner, is super focused on financials. Like, that he's the guy, right? He's the finance guy, and thank God he is. He's awesome. And we are in business today because he is so focused on financials. He's like, that's his thing, right? And I'm super crazy focused on what are the promises we made to our clients, and are we delivering those promises? And at least historically, that was kind of my role in early Developer Town. And each of the partners kind of brought their own superpower that we like to talk about. And Nathan was really the one who brought this idea that if we don't have a brand, whether that brand is like our external facing brand to prospects, but he really also extended that to employees of like, what does it mean to be here? And he really flew that flag early on. And then later, a partner named Michael Coffey flew that flag. And it's kind of bounced around a little bit since then. But if those guys hadn't done that, this would have been a different place, right? Like they really care about that. And it's not that none of the other partners didn't care about it, but we weren't intentional about it, right? And I do feel like there's always been somebody on our team who's always been intentional about it, and that's been a huge asset. So I would say have somebody on the team who's intentional about culture. That's step number one. And maybe I'm sure there are wrong answers there, but just thinking about it and having somebody who's at least got some sort of plan will make a huge difference, right? Number two, I think, was, we did things for a while, especially when we were a smaller team, that culturally played to the desires of the team that we had, right? So like we did a thing for the first year or maybe two. We did it for a while called Five Guys Friday. Every Friday, the entire company would pack up for lunch and go to Five Guys for lunch. I mean, talk about crazy, massive spending. But it was this small thing, but everybody loved it. Everybody ate burger. We're all unhealthy computer science nuts, right? So we all ate Five Guys, and it was this great little cultural thing. Like, if we had a vegetarian on the team, or if that didn't fit, we wouldn't have done it, right? So like you can't. I think there's another thing there, which is you can't force culture on anybody, or you're necessarily alienating them, right? We also had a thing where I think it's been a while. I think it was like every Wednesday night or every other Wednesday night, if you were working in the office past 10 o'clock at night, we would all go out to Rock Bottom Brewery for, and beers and appetizers were on the firm, right? Like just a small reward for just crushing it in a startup, right? And again, what if somebody had a problem with alcohol? Like, you can't do that. That's not right. Like, you can't do that. So I think part of it is like, you want to build these small things that become, things that people talk about, and why they're there. These small little things matter, but you have to do it around the team that you have, right? And I think, early on thinking through that, not like, oh, I read this, like I know that Developer Town does this, or I know that the guys at Google used to do this. Like just because somebody else did it and was successful with it, that does not mean your team is going to be successful with it, right? You have to play the team you have, right?
Okay. So for those listening to us, even if you don't eat beef or you don't drink beer, you can still work for Developer Town, right?
Yeah, we don't do Five Guys Friday anymore. sadly for me. No. But and that's the other thing. Our cultural rituals have changed, right? Like, so the things that used to be rituals are nothing like what we do now, right? Like, so, and the biggest thing that has changed them are the people who champion them here, right? Like, there are tons of things that we do that an individual employee just started doing, right? And that to me is that's how you find those gems, right? Like, that's what makes it work. So I think that's a big one. Find out what's congruent with the team. I think I do think space is important, and thinking about space is important. Being intentional about the space that you have.
It is.
It is hard for a lot of small companies that are in co-working spaces to really get a sense of identity in those spaces. So we have a couple of small companies that we've started that are 3-4 employees, and we're so lucky that they're here physically in our space and not in a co-working space somewhere, because here in this physical space with their tiny houses that they can form a space that is uniquely theirs, it creates a sense of identity, right? And I think especially teams that are storming and norming, like, they need that, right? So I think being intentional about space is important. I love co-working spaces. I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for that.
There's one next door.
That's right. There's one next door, and we love the speakeasy, but it's at a certain size in your company,
right,
it's just not the right answer anymore, right?
It's a good point.
So I think that's important, and that same thing applies. There's a corollary to that, which is if you have a remote workforce, you have to be intentional about those relationships with that remote workforce, as intentional as you think about space, because that is, how do you communicate? How often do you try to create meetings where there's FaceTime? How often, that is kind of the same thing as thinking about space, right? What's that relationship with those remote people so that we can form the bonds that we need to form to be successful? I don't know, man. I think bring your dog to work is an important early cultural thing. We're a big bring your dog to work culture. That's probably not what you're looking for.
Dogs don't fight; they get along.
Well, we have tiny little houses, so they never get a chance to interact with one another.
That's right.
Your dog stays in your house. That's the total win. Yeah. I don't know. I think one of the things that's been interesting. I'm a member of a couple of CEO groups with founders of companies similar to Developer Town around the country, and we talk a lot about benefits, like what benefits do you guys offer? What benefit, what's the difference been? So I know a couple of companies that offer employee lunches, catered employee lunches every single day, and I know companies that offer ridiculous gold-plated benefits, and I know companies that offer all these different things, right? And there's almost no benefit you can name where, through this experience of listening to all these founders, myself included, and Developer Town included, we have our own horror stories where we can't tell you a benefit and the perverse things that happen over time with that benefit, right? Yeah. So anything that sounds like an awesome win, I promise you someday, 5 years from now, you will look back at with regret and be like, why did we do that? It was just an awful idea. When at the time it was a fine idea, right? Yeah. So I do think there's a lot of, people think culture is benefits, and culture is your printed values, and culture is your logo. And it's culture is none of that. Culture is how people treat one another, right? That's your culture. If you want to know what your company's culture is, go look at how team members treat one another when pressure is high. That's your culture.
That's an awesome definition of it.
And everything else is how you try to influence your culture, and it's how you try to explain your culture to the outside world, but it's not your culture, right? We have values here at Developer Town that we talk about, but that's us trying to shape the culture. It is in some ways it's a reflection of the culture, but it's also us trying to be intentional about shaping it. These are the things we value because this is how we want to treat each other. It doesn't mean at our worst moments that's actually what we're doing, right? So so we, I think it's when you think about what you want your culture to be, that it's an ever-evolving thing, right? Because as the team changes, the culture changes, and
exactly,
grow in
because
size.
culture is made by people, right?
That's
So
right.
as people come and go, there are going to be some changes and different energies and synergies, right?
Yep.
So we're getting close to the end. One thing that I typically ask our guests, I ask a bit more of a personal question so that our listeners get to know our guests a bit more intimately. So you teased a little bit earlier on in the conversation about owning a farm.
Yeah.
What kind of farm do you own? Are you a farmer? What do you do with that farm?
I own a hobby farm. So in 2010, we started Developer Town. My wife got pregnant, and we bought a farm. So it is hands down the worst year of my life in terms of change and drama and complexity. Like, it take 3 crazy, buying a house, getting pregnant, starting a company.
Yeah.
Like, just do all that at once. It is awesome every single year.
At least after that, you
that's
don't,
exactly right. Yeah, it's like it's not 2010. I'm fine. It's that's not so bad. It's fine. And the reason why we did all that is we bought the property for the farm because when my wife got pregnant, because my wife and I both decided that we wanted to find a way to instill some different values in our kid, like meaningful work, right? Like I grew up in my parents both did retail, so I grew up in a family where by the age of 9, because there are no child labor laws when you work for your parents. Awesome. Thank you to the state of Indiana. That I could be working at the age of 9. So I learned early on, like I learned what hours are, what customer service is, what the value of a dollar is. Like, I learned all that stuff, and I wanted to recreate that for my kids. My wife did too. I shouldn't say we wanted to recreate that for our kids because she has a killer work ethic too. And we didn't see how we could do that working in a software business, because unless my child is a freak of nature, he's probably not going to be. He's probably not going to be doing production level code at the age of 9, right? Like, so I have zero farming in my background, but my wife has a little bit. So she was open to the idea when I said we should get a farm and like we can do meaningful work, right? Like, why do you have to make your bed when you're a kid? Because your mom wants you to make your bed, right? Why do you have to get up and feed the animals? Because they will die if you don't feed them, right? Like, it's meaningful work. Like, there's a clear outcome where there's like, okay, I have to do this, right? So that was the theory, and it's kind of worked. My son is 6 now, and some change, and we have another child now. We have 2 kids, and his work ethic is killer. He helps me chop wood. He helps with the animals. He does all sorts of stuff around the house. He's 6, so he's not doing as much work as he used to when he was 4 and did everything. Now there's a little bit of pushback, but it's totally translating what we want. So we have chickens, turkeys. We tried quail for a year, and quail got voted off the island. We have bees, and this year we're getting hogs. And then, of course, we have a monster garden that's just for us. But none of it is like, this is why it's called a hobby farm. We don't really sell any of it. It's all for us. Any excess inventory we have, I just bring here to the office and give away to our employees.
Okay, awesome. Well, Mike, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. It was an awesome conversation.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
For our listeners, if they want to follow or learn more about Developer Town, what's the best way to follow DT on social media?
Yep, at Developer Town on Twitter. I'm positive we have a Facebook page. I just think it's Developer Town. I don't get out there very often. Those are probably and I also believe we're Developer Town on Instagram. I don't know how much we do the Instagram. We're a big Twitter company, so I would say at Developer Town on Twitter, and feel free to reach out with any questions. We're happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website at exsummits.com to find out when our next events are. You can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co.